Welcome to the show. We're going to talk about the rising tide of a return to tradition and patriotism all over the world in virtually every main religion. Fascinating topic with the world's most exuberant conservative, Dr. Steve Turley of Turley Talks, right here on The Patrick Coffin Show. This episode of the show brought to you by MyPillow. That's right. I have not only used MyPillow and continue to. They have travel pillows, they have pillowcases, they have sheets. I've interviewed the founder and CEO, Mike Lindell, former crack addict who built this incredible business, delivering culture-renewing sleep everywhere. I'm a huge fan of what Mike has built. MyPillow.com. My name, Patrick, Patrick, gets you a big old Patrick Coffin Show user discount. You can also find out almost a free copy of his book that's soon to be a major motion picture. It's called What Are the Odds? So go to MyPillow.com. Patrick, as the coupon code, gets you a big old discount. So glad you joined us. I've been admiring this guy's his books, mainly through YouTube. Turley Talks on YouTube's now crushing the interwebs, across the 500,000, heading for 1 million subscribers. I call him the world's most exuberant conservative. Every time I'm feeling down and kind of depressed about how things are going, I click play on Turley Talks, and within about 10 seconds, I've got a great reset. Dr. Steve Turley, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Patrick. It's great to be here. You're already making me feel better, so thank you. That's wonderful. Appreciate it very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Let's kind of press play. I like to get the context of why people are doing what they're doing. You are a PhD holder from Durham. You have written in First Things and Touchstone and a lot of different places. I would say middle to highbrow, kind of my sweet spot in a way. You're also an Orthodox Christian, father of 4, husband of 1. When did you decide to kind of drop the gloves and become a public influencer on social media? Maybe we can start there.
Yeah, that's a great question. We were talking earlier about it. I have 2 degrees. I have a degree in music and a degree in theology. So I like to joke I went where the money is, and and when I was doing my doctorate in theology at Durham, so this is going back 13 years ago or so, I came across a field of study known as post-secular studies, which really fascinated me because I have to admit I tend to be a relatively pessimistic person by nature. So I come across these studies. I come across these studies post-secular. I was very skeptical of them because they were collectively arguing, and these are scholars like Stephen Mostrovich of Texas A&M, and even to a certain extent Sam Huntington of Harvard University was arguing for sort of a post-globalist, post-secular age emerging after the fall of the Soviet Union. And what they were arguing was precisely that the secularized, sort of one-size-fits-all, very sterile, scientifically rationalistic world order was basically collapsing. It was falling apart, and it was being slowly but surely replaced by a return to tradition, a return to the great religions of our civilizations. And when I first read that, I was like, well, that would be so cool if it were true. And so I thought it's probably true for Africa, Middle East, India, Russia, but forget the West. And then I always kept dabs with it. I kept reading it a bit and staying in touch with it. And then I'll never forget June 23rd, 2016, Brexit. And against all odds, more Brits voted to end their relation. They voted to shrink the EU for the first time in its history. More Brits voted to do that than had voted for any other candidate or for any other cause in British election history. And that was just the beginning. Then we saw just a few months later, President Trump, again, against all odds, becoming really the first nationalist populist president that we've had post-modern president in the best sense of the term. I think we can use it. And it just kept going. We saw these nationalist, populist, sort of post-globalist figures winning in France and Poland and
Brazil.
Austria. And it just kept going. Brazil, absolutely, Jair Bolsonaro. We have Narendra Modi in Italy. even technically, Japan now is more Shinto oriented than it's been in the last 50 years. And everywhere I look, I just saw nationalism, populism, and traditionalism making a comeback. And that's when I said, you know what? All right, I admit I see defeat. The scholarship has won. And so it became sort of a template for me to be able to interpret the world events that were going on. And I thought, I got to share this. I just got to share this with as many people as I can. So a colleague of mine suggested I start a YouTube channel. And we did November 1st. So we did it right after Brexit. So it was a couple of months after Brexit. So it was November 1st, 2016, just before Trump won. I did 7 videos in a row predicting he would win precisely because of this scholarship and what it was forecasting for the future. So I said, all right, this is we got something here. So that's how it all started.
That's interesting. There's a German Catholic philosopher named Dietrich von Hildebrand who was expunged from polite German society for his fighting the Third Reich and Hitler specifically. Very interesting guy. His wife, Dr. Alice von Hildebrand, still alive. And he would talk about the way out of this pendulum swing, whether we're talking a slide to the far right, a slide to the far left, post-Christian versus post-secular. The way to see the solution forward is that the truth, I mean, he's coming from a specifically Christian point of view. The truth is above the spectrum of the extremes. So while it's tempting to ride the wave in the opposite direction, whether you're talking Brexit or Brexit and so on. However, have you thought, I'm sure you've pondered this, the danger of the boomerang effect, where you end up in fighting the 2% of crazies on the far, far left, you become a parody of what you set out to be. So in other words, not only return to tradition, but a return to balance and sanity. Does that compute to see what I'm getting at?
Oh, absolutely. So one of the things I like to say is, as these scholars are arguing, we may be entering into the rise of what I like to call a new conservative age. For me, conservatism is just traditionalism when all said and done. That's what unites your Russian Orthodox conservative with your Texan conservative or your Hindu conservative with a Roman Catholic conservative. We're all going back to tradition. We're all going back in some way, shape, or form to the philosophia perennis, as it were. And so one of the things I like to point out is just because we're going back to sort of a new conservative age, as it were, going back to the future, right? That doesn't mean we're going to a problem-free age. We're still going to have problems. They're just going to have different complexions. Or another way of putting it, we're going to have the same variables, but with different content meshed in. For example, one of the big things that I think we're seeing with the death of the left today, and I mean that by that, the old, 20th century modern liberalism, which is basically dying. I think what's his name? The Hungarian 20th century historian John Lukács. I'll never forget. I was at a ISI, Intercollegiate Studies Institute, lecture he was giving. And I'll never forget his opening words. This is people don't know, he's this wonderful, Hungarian, or he emigrated from Hungary and from communism. Or no, I think this is even pre-communism. I can't remember when he came on over because he died just recently in his 90s.
That's right.
But anyway, an amazing 20th century story, really embodied it in terms of leaving totalitarianism to life. Eminent scholar, and the first words out of his mouth is, "You and I are living in an age of the death of liberalism." That we all went, what? That piqued our interest there. And what he basically saying is ideological, progressive, brave new world liberalism is basically dead. No one's talking about it anymore. We're all talking about going back somewhere. And with the death of that liberalism, that means now that the new political animosity is increasingly becoming the civic nationalists who believe in a polyethnic society where multiple ethnicities all come together under common culture and rituals and symbol systems and celebrate it in this multivariant sort of way, versus ethno-nationalists. And ethno-nationalists, that could be some dangerous stuff, as we saw in the late 90s. And that's where you start seeing balkanization coming in, neo-segregationism coming in. And the left today, ironically, sounds a lot more like the alt-right than they do, the classical left. And so what we're actually seeing, it seems to me, is we're seeing a breakup of two different rights, rights. So we've moved from the old right-left economic-based and class-based categories to now much more of a culture-based, identity-based category into this postmodern context. And that's going to bring with it a whole host of other problems, as we're already seeing with the riots and the like. I know the left is doing everything they can to try to baptize it and make it look like it's something that's consistent with good, civil rights, left-wing causes. Doesn't have a bone. I mean, if you compare what is being talked about today among, say, BLM advocates with Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech, citing Isaiah, citing Amos, we've gone astray. We are a Judeo-Christian people, and we need to come back and be true to that, versus what we're hearing today, which is we want Black-only dorms. We want Black-only hospitals. We want Black-only orientation programs. We want to defund and disband the police. This is a whole different ballgame. This really is more of an ethnocentrism, a tribalism that scholars, post-secular scholars, warned about.
Yeah, there's some strange bedfellows being formed, and it all has the whiff of desperation. A good example is I'm very close with the Chaldean community in San Diego. Chaldean Christians suffered unbelievably for a long time under the Islamic boot in Iraq. And so their cathedral just this past weekend was vandalized by the same crew of soy boy cowards with their dopey masks. These guys are on camera. They're probably going to be arrested. But they had swastikas, the words white power, Biden 2020, BLM. Yes, the Iraqi people, those famous white nationalists. I mean, they didn't even know what they were attacking. Look, a statue, tear that damn thing down. I don't care who it's of. Just tear it down. So the arguments are wanting, and so the violence has to ratchet up because they're now running on empty tank as far as providing a debate position, right? I mean, I want to find common cause with them. They want me deleted. That's the difference.
Well, you hit it. I mean, you nailed it there. I mean, that, to me, that's it. I mean, I think you've identified it more profoundly. I mean, a liberal, in its best sense of the term, a liberal democracy. We're already seeing calls, particularly in Europe, for liberal nationalisms and so on and so forth. Yoram Hazony, the Israeli American scholar, is one of the biggest proponents of that. A basic liberal democratic society requires something called the communication model. And the communication model says, in effect, that you and I may be of different ideologies, races, ethnicities, backgrounds, and the like, but we can, through common grace, we can come to common agreements. We can come through natural law. We can come to common assessments of the problem and common solutions and work through them together. That's the dream of a polyethnic society. What we're seeing today is, without any question whatsoever, the total breakdown of the communication model, when we're hearing things like microaggressions, or what was the other one? Oh, what are they now accusing Amy Coney Barrett of now, right? This one fellow accused her of white colonialism because she happened to do something, the most beautiful thing imaginable, and that is adopt two children from Haiti. I mean, and then so what you're seeing, if I think it was Rod Dreher that said, after one of the terrible shootings, and the Republicans came out, said, our thoughts and prayers are with the victims and their families. And then they got excoriated by leftists, saying your prayers mean nothing and so on. And I think it was Dreher, who tends to be very pessimistic. I have a lot of disagreements with Dreher, but nevertheless, he said something very profound. If we can't even agree to pray for someone anymore, the society's broken down. And that's where this concern of like a kind of civil war, sort of a pre-Civil War rhetoric seems to be, I think, a perfectly legitimate assessment of what's going on, especially when you see armed militias rising up. There's over 500 today organized all across the country. They've doubled in the last 10 years. Can only imagine more of them. And their biggest recruits our law enforcement.
That's
So yeah,
totally
I'm
true.
with you. I think if you have the breakdown of communication, particularly the communication model, where different ethnicities, different ideologies, so forth, can nevertheless come together to form common agreements and common assessments and common solutions. If that's not possible anymore,
Mhm.
you could kiss society goodbye.
That is so fundamental right there. This is what John's gospel called logos, right? In the beginning was the
Mhm.
logos. And you said you just hit it, communication. If you look at Strong's Greek dictionary, any interlinear, and look up the word logos, you're going to find page after page after page of synonyms. It means order, it means intellect, it means design, the substructure of law, but it also means speech. And if people in a country can't speak to each other on something as formally seen as super obvious, namely good to pray for someone, if that is broken, that is a country on the way out.
And as you pointed out, the order unravels. We get the word logistics from
That's
that,
right.
right?
Logical.
It's not just word; it's order. It's Genesis 1. He speaks and he orders. So that's
Mhm.
why our SATs test kids on vocabulary and math when all's said and done. It's logos.
Yeah.
It's all. And if the words are no longer common, if we can no longer dialogos,
Mhm.
forget the order unravels. You
Right.
got it. And that's the big fear. That's the big fear as we move into the sort of next phase, whatever you want to call it,
Mhm.
in a post-globalist, post-modern world. And that's where faith and the way faith glues the people together, particularly the Christian faith, which is able to overcome ethno-tribalistic hostilities,
Yeah.
like we saw in Rwanda, the way the church has been so extraordinarily powerful in trying to bring healing among hostile tribes that were
Mhm.
obviously a horrific genocide there.
Yeah.
If we are embracing that, I think we're going to be good to go in a sense. I think we can't stop the genie out of the bottle, but we can put forward a far more beautiful, true, and good vision that
Mhm.
will, I think, attract people to its its loveliness and its desirableness.
You just nudged up against another controversy that we could go several hours on, and that is the claim that SAT scores themselves are racist and colonial. That there's a built-in colonial bias into whether 2 and 2 is 4.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, this is where I know you've worked a lot with Jordan Peterson. I mean, this is where he's brilliant. He's brilliant with the whole intersectionality idea.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, once you open up the genie's out of the bottle, I mean, we're not going to stop. Everything is racist. Truth is racist now, right?
That's right.
Truth.
Yeah.
What was it? The students at Sonoma College, I believe, in California, wrote that letter because the dean or the president of the college came out and said, we reaffirm our vision and our mission to uncover truth wherever it is. And students sent him a letter. I know it sounds bizarre for those of us who kind of think through these things. They sent him a letter and said, your whole notion of objective truth is itself a white colonialist, hangover from when we used to objectify people of color and impose white European truth on the rest of them. Now, of course, we all know we're listening to this nonsense and going, do I even have to point out to you the self-defeating nature of this? But
Yeah.
you got it. It's not going to stop. And this was John Lucas's point. The good news is it's getting utterly absurd, and more people are seeing it.
And I
so
think
the more you push it out to the infinite degree of intersectionality, the moment when you blame a family that did not even remotely have to adopt 2 kids from Haiti, the moment you blame them for bringing them out of that squalor and into a life that would be a dream for any other human generation throughout human history.
Yeah.
The moment you call that race, I mean, most people could see through that.
My take on the Barrett's decision to the attack on the Barrett's decision to adopt those 2 absurdly beautiful kids is that even if it wasn't Haiti, even if it was Hoboken, that is an implicit indictment of a guilty conscience with respect to abortion, because that means 2 children were rescued from that fate. So
That's wonderful.
Beneath the table in
good.
that
I like that.
is another layer of it. Yeah, we see examples of when the left pushes and pushes and pushes. It not only energizes people who are maybe conservative or traditional in a nascent way, they come alive, but it knocks people off the fence who really weren't quite paying attention before. You see this with these massive police overreach incidents, as we've seen recently with lockdown protests, just normal people, moms, doctors, ordinary folks speaking up in protest, being met with a truncheon or a police baton. In Montreal, so I'm speaking from a Canadian living in America perspective, you didn't see this on the mainstream media, but the Quebec government imposed another layer of police state-like strictures with respect to masks. And between 50, it's hard to get estimates, 70,000 I've heard 100,000, whatever. It's a massive crowd 2 Saturdays ago in Montreal protesting with American flags, pictures of Donald Trump chanting USA, USA in French-Canadian Montreal. Totally unforeseen.
Wow.
Counterintuitive, but people have had enough.
Absolutely. We have good friends out in Moscow, Idaho. You might have seen that Christ Presbyterian Church was doing a psalm sing outside of their town hall or their city hall in Moscow, Idaho. And 3 people were arrested for not social distancing. It was absurd. And when he's being arrested, Gabriel Wrench was one of them, the fellow that I know, good, a wonderful man. And when he was being arrested, he and the people around the cops pointed out, you understand, just a couple of weeks ago, BLM was out here causing all kinds of trouble. No one got arrested. Now here we are. We're your supporters. Yeah. We're the one who actually wants to say back the blue, and you're arresting us. So the lesson is, if you don't want to get arrested, burn courthouses down. If you do want to get arrested, support the police and comply. Yeah, it's Orwellian. It's insane.
It is Orwellian. We look back at people like George Orwell and Aldous Huxley, and we think, those were really clever, imaginative writers. And then, boom, 2020 happened. Oh, I get it. Another irony is that it was in Moscow. It sounds like Moscow circa 1947, right?
You do. Yeah. You do have to qualify Idaho. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Right. That's a great point. Yeah. It is ironic, is it not? Yeah. But again, I think, like you're saying, I think this is part of, this isn't normal. This is not the way a society should be functioning. So to me, that tells me, okay, something's going on here. There's a clash. There's a transition period. We're in a dissonance right now. There's not much harmony going on. Trump is definitely a very disruptive candidate. He was voted to be disruptive, and Brexit was disruptive, and Marine Le Pen is disruptive, and so you can just keep going. Certainly, Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, Ivan Duque in Colombia. We could go on and on. The disruption is happening because we're moving from a modern period into a postmodern period. That's not just philosophy. I mean, that's politics, that's social order, and it's messy. It doesn't happen in a clean way. Whoever dreamed that a Playboy billionaire would be the most pro-life president we've ever dreamed of having. I mean, God writes straight lines with crooked sticks, and you don't get more crooked than Pomo, that's for sure. So.
It's totally true. And my spiritual father, Archbishop Sheen, used to say that divinity is always where you least expect it.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's lovely.
Our Lord didn't arrive in New York or Paris or even Jerusalem or Athens. No, Hicktown. It was so Hick-like that the woman at the fire recognized Peter's Galilean accent. So not the cool kid town, right?
Right. Yeah, whatever you do to the least of these, right? Yeah.
Now, there was I haven't heard him in a long time, but writer, radio host Michael Savage used to have a tagline for his show, Borders, Language, Culture, which I think is a very fair summary of what we mean by a nation. You have to have borders that are defended. You have to have a common language, otherwise that speech thing gets disrupted or doesn't exist. And you have to have a shared culture. And I've thought a fair amount about what culture is. And let me throw this at you, Dr. Steve. I think culture is almost a synonym for religion. If you believe God is a master, so the Quran has 99 names for God, not one of them is love. On the other hand, you have Jesus saying God is a father, which is not a quaint metaphor, it's an ontological reality. Those two visions of the divine, if you will, are going to color and to a great extent condition what kind of culture you have, right? Cultus, Latin for worship, to till, to cultivate. So just kind of, I wanted to throw that borders language culture past you. To me, it sounds like a very succinct summary of what a nation is.
Yeah, Michael Savage had his finger on this early on. He really had both, I think, a learned as well as an intuitive sense. He was all for Trump right away when you had 16 of the GOP's finest out there, and starting, I guess, in 2015 in the campaign for the candidacy. Yeah, culture anthropologists do not differentiate between religion and culture, generally speaking. Culture, the cult of culture is religion. Yeah. And religion, in effect, is the old term religio means social order. So this is where Bill Kavanaugh, the Catholic political scholar, has done some excellent work. He was able to find when we redefined religion as a personal, private, belief.
Yeah. Automated, hyper-independent.
He found it around the 18th century during the Enlightenment in a redefinition of knowledge. So religion became simply a personal opinion, like a sentiment. Prior to that, religio, the way Augustine would use the term religio and so forth, it meant social order. And social order, you can today we do tend to make distinction between society and culture. Society are more the structures, the demographic, economic, political, structures of things, where culture would be more the symbol systems, the meaning systems. But in the end, culture is going to bring them together. You could make a conceptual distinction, but they need each other and they imply one another. So absolutely, a lot of people think they're spiritual but not religious, and they don't see that itself as a religion. It's a religion creates the sacred. That's the way Durkheim would coin it. Really more or less one of the godfathers of modern day cultural anthropology and sociology at the turn of the 20th century. And the sacred is rules, understandings, and goals considered absolute and unquestionable. And we can't function without it that way. We see it in as simple as a thing as a Little League baseball game, and we see it as something as massive as United Nations or the EU or the International Monetary Fund. There have got to be rules, understandings, and goals considered absolute and unquestionable, and they can't be something that we personally derive, because it starts with the assumption even if we did think we should make up our own rules, as natural law theorists have pointed out, that only starts with the assumption we ought to do that, right? Which is itself a sense of a moral obligation, a moral compulsion that we need to create our own rules. Well, but there's one rule that we didn't create, and that's the rule that we get to create our own rules. So absolutely, that's why they tend to see all cultures are rooted in some kind of classical religion of some kind. It's not something that we don't discover how to do social an investigation to the nature of things. That happens, but that's only after we've been given the tools of social order that, generally speaking, are revealed to us. So that's why rituals and symbol systems and the like and full-blown religions are so amazing, so powerful. And again, I'll bring them up again. Your acquaintance there, Jordan Peterson, who has done a stellar job in relation to the Sam Harrises of the world and the like, to say, look, you may think you can kind of create your own society and culture piecemeal from some kind of, rational scientific approach to things, but there is no way that you can bring together piecemeal massive conceptions of the cosmos, massive conceptions of truth, goodness, and beauty, literature, art, architecture, music, poetry, politics, family, gender, and the like, all in a harmony, all in a logos, the
Yeah.
way the great religions have been able to do. And that's why they keep sticking around. They keep
Yeah.
making a comeback because they're so good. So absolutely. So yeah, borders, language, culture is going to, so I tend to see three things. I see borders, economy, and culture. So I would put language under culture. I think that's just being a little, you know, yeah, I wouldn't quibble with it, but um, I think that is so key to understanding what's happening today, why we're going back to borders, language, culture, or borders, economy, and culture. Economy meaning bringing our manufacturing jobs back home.
Mhm.
It's just we've lost confidence in the globalist structure. We had confidence as long as the Soviet Union was around. That's what some scholars have pointed out. So it was either our way or it was going to be their way. There was going to be a one-size-fits-all global hegemony, and we better make sure we win, or we're in big trouble. Once the
Yeah.
Soviet Union fell, that POMO kicked in, and that became an increasingly difficult thing to hold on to. The idea that there was a one-size-fits-all political, economic, and cultural system for all people, times, and places. And so people have just very organically, very naturally been re-embracing those frames of reference. But inadvertently, they don't realize it. I think they're re-embracing classical religion in the process.
Yeah, people are always tempted to find the magic bullet, just that secret key that unlocks everything. But people are complicated. We've got this little thing called human nature, which is fallen, and we're flawed, and this is not our true home. But I think perhaps conservatives, maybe more than liberals, have the presupposition that there's this messianic thing that should be happening. Why isn't everything perfect now? Why can't we have the perfect cell phone with perfect cell coverage and Skype that always works, and bad people that will stop acting badly? The vexing imperfection of things keeps hitting us in the face. Let me ask a question about the world post 1989 with the I guess slow self implosion of the Soviet Union. With that somewhat gone, I've read recently, I don't remember the source, that was comparing what happened to Nazi Germany that got denazified by the Allies after World War II. There was no communistification of Russia. It just kind of crumpled, and then we had perestroika and the détente of the Mikhail Gorbachev era. And it's still operating somewhat on lower octane influence, I would say. So here's my question. Do you think that from the clash of civilizations point of view, harking back to your alluding to Sam Huntington, is China a greater threat, or is global Islam a greater threat to this thing we call the West?
Okay, that's a great question. So if we go to, that's a very, well, I would say China now, but we'll have to see what goes on with Tehran tends to be the center of Islamic globalism. So the Brazilian philosopher Olavo de Carvalho has a fascinating thesis that we're actually seeing three globalisms. So there's a Western globalism, centered around, say, DC, New York, LA, and Brussels, which is primarily an economic globalism. So basically, corporations run everything. when all said and done, what he calls meta-capitalists, which is interesting. So you would see people like Zuckerberg and the like as not even capitalists. They're above capitalism. They control the markets at this point. They're oligarchs, as Steve Bannon would say. Then you have a kind of Stalin-esque political globalism, which he sees as Beijing, as China. And of course, they're very powerful economically as well. But the big thing is the management and the control of that through a centralized state. And then he sees a third globalism, which we call, for lack of a better term, a religious globalism, which is coming out of the Middle East and militant Islam, expansionist Islam, which again, if you notice, it fits into that political, economic, and religious structure that we're going to. So these are the globalist options that people are going back to, but more at micro levels in terms of their nation state and the like. So yeah, I would want to consult on Olavo de Carvalho, who I've gotten to know. He's a wonderful man, a brilliant scholar. I'd love to ask him that question. Which does he see as more, more of a threat now? I would assume it is right now China, just because of the financial advantage, the Belt and Road Initiative that's become very successful, at least prior to COVID. They flexed their muscle during COVID, which was very fascinating with the WHO and the like. They seem to have much more in trying to create an alternative globalism. They seem to have their hands much more influentially in the global structures than Tehran does. Tehran still seems a bit isolated and specific to the Middle East and Northern Africa, and a bit to South America as well. We'll have to see on that.
Yeah.
But I would see, but looking forward, absolutely, that's going to be a major, as we're going back to religion, it's going to look very plausible for an Islamic kind of globalism, as a Christendom, and Islamic Christendom looked plausible in its day. And I think we'll probably gain some more plausibility particularly if the major Christian nations like Brazil, United States, and Russia were able to start creating a bit of more of a religious alliance going on. Because you really got, if you think that through, it's really fascinating. That's what Ernesto Araújo, who's the foreign minister of Brazil, is actually arguing for ultimately. Because then you've got a predominantly Catholic nation, a predominantly Protestant nation, a predominantly Orthodox nation, the three branches sort of coming together and forming a very, very large, 700 million plus population coalition around faith. So they may be doing their own things economically and politically, but if the faith leaders can start creating alliances, that would be an extraordinary moment, and I think a very strong hedge against any potential Islamic globalism in the future.
Very good. So many tributaries off that particular river you just let forth there, Steve. Do you think that what we call the culture war is really ultimately a theological war between faiths? On the one hand, you have faith in Jesus Christ, the divine Son of God, faith in the order of the universe, in the uncaused cause on the one hand, and how that became manifest in law and all the customs of a culture. On the other side, you have another kind of faith, which I'll call fundamentalist atheism. A blind belief that this secular age is the arbiter and the main standard. Because it seems like two kinds of faiths clashing. A faith that is materialist and atheistic versus a faith in something objective and transcendent. There's a line from Chesterton that I will probably botch, but the heart of it is, even the atheist has to make an act of faith in his own mind's ability to correctly understand the world. You can't even prove that you're not in a deep sleep right now, to quote Descartes, right? So does it come down to a war over which faith will be true and dominant?
Yeah, the whole notion that the world is only material, that reality is only material, is itself a metaphysical prejudice. It's a statement of faith. I actually was talking to someone not too long ago from LA, a podcaster who was more libertarian. He would agree with me pretty much on everything, but he didn't like the fact that I used religion as the basis to get there, or that I was advocating the return to religion or anything like that. And it was just very fascinating because, listening to his rationale for it, it was like, I didn't want to, but I was like, collective, like humanity doesn't believe this old modernist 18th century, 19th century dogma anymore. You know that, right? We're in POMO now, postmodern land, and postmodernists more than anyone have called out the modernists of offering their own alternative culture and religion and rituals and creeds and the like. So it's funny. I would agree 100%. I think culture wars ultimately are wars between two cults, two different ways of thinking about ultimate issues in our world. And the good news is that the modernist conception of life, which is that through scientific rationalism, we can create a one-size-fits-all political and economic system for all people's times, places, at least since 1979 in Francois Lyotard's publication of The Postmodern Condition. Nobody believes that anymore. No, they didn't believe it in the first place in the non-Western worlds, the so-called global South. But the global North doesn't believe that anymore. Mm-hmm. I see it with my students. It's so fascinating, Patrick, because they'll start off. It may be anything. If we get into a theological issue or something, they might say, "Well, hasn't science disproven this or disproven that?" And it literally doesn't take me more than about 5 or 6 seconds to get them to say, "Well, yeah, but we can't really know anything for sure."
Right.
So they move.
Yeah.
Right.
Another self-refuting thing.
This deference, this blind deference to a modernist way of referring to or responding to faith that's been cultivated over the last 200 years. And then you just point out that, oh, wait a minute. No, you forgot. You don't believe that anymore. You actually recognize that science it's itself a practice. It has its own assumptions, and it can in many ways even be a faith and the like. You recognize this. So how do you know everything they believe is true? And well, that's true. We don't actually know anything for sure. And all of a sudden, boom, they're now postmodernists. All truth is cultural. Yeah. All truth is relative and the like. So yeah, I think in many respects the culture wars were fought the best way they could be fought in a modern like context. But in the end, I just think there are much bigger forces that are going on right now. And I mean, political, economic, sociological, cultural forces that are clearly moving in the direction of a loss of the foundation for left-wing secular liberalism, which was modernity, even although it continues to get exported in the form of globalism, no question about it.
Yeah.
But if the roots have died out, if the modern roots have died out, that one-size-fits-all, right, scientific rationalism, then it's only a matter of time before the fruits die out as well.
Yeah.
This is happening at the same time that Rodney Stark at Baylor University and many others, Talal Asad and so forth, are arguing we are seeing the single greatest religious renewal we have ever witnessed going on in the world. More Muslims are attending mosque than ever before. More Catholics are going to mass than ever before. Russia had barely 6,000 churches in 1991 after it was cleansed, religiously cleansed of communism. Now they're approaching the height of Tsardom in terms of the amount of churches that they have. We can go on and on. The biggest Hindu temple on the planet is currently being built right now. The biggest Orthodox church in the world is being built in Romania right now. These are not bygone eras. This is happening now in an astonishing return to religion. So modernity is faltering and falling away, and religion, and particularly conservative religion, is making a massive return. And we know how that's going to play itself out. You don't have to be geniuses. So it's the culture war is being fought at mass levels that's beyond anything we're doing.
I think when people read Yahoo News and poor Matt Drudge, can we have a moment of silence for Matt Drudge? What happened to that guy? Apart from hypercharged capitalism and wanting clicks, but if your steady diet is only doom and gloom. Headlines from a conservative point of view that we're losing. We have to roll over. Let's raise the white flag together. I like the way you just summarized it, and it reminds me of an image that I cite. My first book is called The Contraception Deception, and I have a chapter called Answering Chicken Little, and it's about the population crisis. We do have a world population crisis. It's called the population implosion, and Philip Longman is a demographer who says if you look at the population of the world is increasing. It increases every year, but it's increasing at a slower and slower rate, much like a train that is going up the side of a mountain. But eventually, in some countries, that train is already past the tipping point where it's not going to make it through the pass. It is going to cascade in reverse, and you're going to have a massive problem. Vladimir Putin said that the loss of 750,000 native-born Russians every year, year after year, is the greatest crisis of Russian history. In Japan, you have 1 point something children. You can't sustain that. So you don't need enemies with guns. You just need your own lack of trust in the future and the refusal to be generous with fertility, even to replace yourself. Anyway, that was a lot.
No, that's key, Patrick. It's so brilliant. And are you familiar with Eric Kaufman in the University of London and his work on this?
Kaufman.
Yeah,
the name rings
brilliant.
a bell.
Kaufmann. Yes. Kaufman. Eric Kaufman's brilliant. He and Longman are very, very. Mm-hmm. They're tracking with each other, but coming at it from different angles. And what Kaufman pointed out is that religious conservatives today are going through a global baby boom. It's absolutely astonishing. So whereas you might see, like even here in the United States, overall population shrinking, if you break down the demographics, you're going to see conservative religionists, right? So particularly Catholics, evangelicals, and the like, are having the children secular liberals aren't. And what makes Kaufman's thesis so fascinating is he calls demography. How did he put it? It is the Achilles heel of secular liberalism, because what secular liberalism does is it redefines the family as a lifestyle choice, and as part of a lifestyle choice, you have to have the freedom not to reproduce. And he says, as it turns out, that's why they're losing population as a percentage of overall population. And conservative religionists who see, just like you said beautifully, who see family and so forth not only sacred, but as part of our duty. It's about, we've received this inheritance, so we pass on this inheritance to others. Forget this whole white privilege nonsense. We're talking inheritance. We're talking something sacred here that shouldn't be just torn down because it's suddenly been redefined. And so what he's noticing is that by 2030, it's that soon in the United States. Same dynamics are going on in Europe, but they're going to take another generation or two there because they're a bit behind. By 2030, we're going to start to see a parity in the demographics between conservative religionists on the one hand, so it's including also Mormons and Amish. Amish double in population every 20 years, and it ain't because of conversions either, I'll tell you that, right? So we're going to see that pair with secular liberals, and then from 2030, it is this. And he predicts that by the end of the century, secular liberals will be no more than about 13 or 14% of populations, Western populations.
Yeah. And so we have the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, mocking women with large families. Remember, he famously said a few years ago, "Show me a woman with 7 or 8 kids who's truly educated." And then you can just see Amy Coney Barrett saying, "Hold my beer," right?
That's true and wonderful on so many levels. I love that. On so many levels. Absolutely.
You see how this drive, we could probably go several hours. I want to turn, by way of landing the plane here, Dr. Steve Turley, my guest. I want to throw people at turleytalks.com and YouTube, which is you're probably going to get to 1 million subscribers sooner than you realize, God willing. There's this deep secular, I'll call it, it's in the secular heart to have this transcendent relationship. And you see some tells. One of the tells is professional sports. You have, let's say, baseball or football, any of the big, massive, that has the imagination of sports fans. In a different way, you have soccer. These are liturgies now. You have a liturgical song at the beginning, the entrance hymn, which is the national anthem. Then you have moments of silence, and then you have championships and cups and awards. And when someone dies,
don't forget icons. You've got icons, right? The
exactly right. You have the flag. You have the logo of the team. What are the Tonys, the Emmys, and the Academy Awards? But razor thin substitute canonizations. We even call them stars, right? The heavens. So I think it's all kind of an aping of true religion. Is this an overplayed card here?
No, there's been some wonderful studies, and that's so good. There's been some wonderful studies on secular ritual and secular religion, as it were. I mean, the Soviets were doing it. The Nazis were brilliant at these sort of things.
Triumph of the will.
And they recognize even the height of modernity. They recognize that human beings are fundamentally symbolic beings. That's a wonderful word, symbalo. It's a Greek word to throw together. And we throw together the material with the spiritual all the time. We can't do it. Even the physicist is doing that, bringing the theory together with the facts, right? So we're mediators of heaven and earth. There's no denying it. There's no way around. That's what made Orwell so fascinating, is that Big Brother became heaven. Big Brother became heaven on earth, and having this omniscience and omnipresence and the like. Except it's he's a horrific God. He's a terrible God. So absolutely, I think you're right on. And again, that's what makes someone like a Peterson and others so brilliant in being able to speak truth to the secular mind in ways that their frames of reference light up. And they go, wait a minute, now I'm getting it. Now that's making sense. I've got to bring meaning together with the facticities of life. And only then are we going to have human flourishing, and so we see it. We see it absolutely in our sports rituals and our Hollywood rituals. That's brilliant, absolutely.
Maybe one.
And I think the big thing too is they'll push back and they'll say, "So isn't that good enough?" or something. And that's when you kind of like, well, Hollywood only goes so far, and sports only goes so far. If you're going to have some kind of meta belief that includes the totality of reality in of itself, you can only go to the major religions. That's the only place we found them.
That's maybe a little analogy here with skin color. If white is all you've got, brother, you're in a heap of trouble. White is essentially an empty, meaningless concept.
That's right.
Maybe just one more layer deeper on the Hollywood secular. My friend Christopher West coined a phrase. I'm totally jealous because it nails what I'm trying to get at. He calls them twisted mystics.
Ooh.
People who are they're outsiders who behave like insiders. You see this. I don't know if it's going to be a book or a talk. I'm working through this Hollywood Jesus thesis, and that is that so many of the great blockbuster, well-beloved films that are you can open them in any city, accidentally retell the gospel. There's the incarnational
absolutely.
principle. So one of my favorite examples is E.T., the extraterrestrial. Oh, Patrick, where are you going with this? Well, E.T. is a being from another world who comes to Earth and is trusted by children and wanted by the authorities. His presence in a room revivifies plants. His touch heals. His heart glows red. He dies. He's literally risen from the dead. At the end, it's basically the 20th chapter of Matthew. He takes off, goes back home, and he says to Elliot, I'll be right here. This is our Lord in highly symbolic form, right? And the amount of ascension there. The final scene is the rocket taking off. And do you remember? Have you seen E.T., Steve?
Of course.
Okay,
it's
so
in the theaters. I'm old enough.
Yeah. Do you remember the contrail at the back of the rocket as it goes home? Is a rainbow.
Oh, I'd have to look at that one again. Oh, there you go.
This is before the rainbow got co-opted.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we got it in Revelation too. It's around the throne room of God.
Right.
Are you familiar with Jonathan Peugeot? He's a fellow Canadian.
Jonathan's been on my show. Jonathan was introduced to me by Jordan Peterson. Yeah, a great, exquisite.
He's really, he's really finding those archetypes in like the Marvel superhero movies and the lot. Perfect.
Yeah,
that's
great ally.
No, I jive with that. Absolutely. I've always told my students, I'm so glad. I don't mean to be a jerk about it, but I'm so glad that one of the evangelical movie production companies didn't get a hold of Pixar's Up. I'm so glad they left it alone because it's so perfect the way it is. It's so utterly perfect without some overt altar call at the end, kind of stuff, which just replaces the Eucharist anyway. But we won't get into that, right? You and I and our liturgical sentiments will start taking over here. Yeah. But because one of the most beautiful things about that movie is when Carl recognizes that once he's got his house at Paradise Falls, but he doesn't have Ellie there to enjoy it, it's nothing. And then when he goes through her adventure book, which he thought was completely blank after a certain amount of pages, with stuff I'm going to do, the title page, he thought it was a complete blank because he thought he had completely broken his promise to bring her to Paradise Falls. He opens it up, and lo and behold, he discovers their wedding pictures together. They're eating in the parks together, the whole life together, page after page after page. And at the end, of course, that's that lovely picture. Everyone cries, and it's him and Ellie together. They're old, they're happy, they're holding hands. And underneath, Ellie writes, "Thanks for the adventure. Now go and have another." And he suddenly realizes at that moment, paradise is not a place so much. Paradise is a person. And their life together was Paradise Falls. That's today you will be with me in paradise because I am paradise. The tree is, the cross is the tree of life, restored. Eve, Mary is the new Eve, to place the fruit of her womb back onto the tree and restore the cosmos and the like. So I'm with you 1,000%. I think 1,800 years of Christian civilization just can't disappear overnight. It resonates with us and our storytellers. And there's no other real story they have other than that's going to resonate with Western populations. Absolutely. I love that ET. I'm gonna re-watch it now.
I'll give you one more. And Saving Private Ryan. My regular listeners have probably heard me talk about this. It's written by Robert Rodat, based on a screenplay treatment by the husband of servant of God Catherine Doherty, the founders of Madonna House. Catherine Doherty is one of the reasons why Thomas Merton became a Catholic. She fled the Communist Revolution. In fact, I'm going to put a show note to Catherine's books in patrickcoffin.media. So Eddie Doherty was ordained a Melkite Rite priest at age 79 or 69, I think. And he, in his day, was a Hollywood screenwriter. So Robert Rodat took his treatment for The Fighting Sullivans, which is based on a true story, and crafted a script that was found by a guy called Steven Spielberg and filmed as Saving Private Ryan. And it's about an everyman soldier who is sent from a higher authority to go into enemy territory. And he sort of hides his identity. We don't learn that Captain Miller is a teacher until about three-quarters of the way through, kind of the messianic secret. And he builds this team of apostles / soldiers, and he teaches them what it means to lay down your life. In this case, not for a friend, a total stranger. And it's not rescuing Private Ryan. It's embedded in the title, Saving Private Ryan. And it's not saving General Ryan or Major Ryan or Captain Ryan. The whole mission is for one member of the lowest on the totem, the private.
Lost sheep,
So it happens, and he says, "Earn this," and that's to me the most beautiful. It's just a very moving thing. There's a super close-up of Matt Damon's eye, and it expands out. Spoiler alert. That's the old man at the Normandy graveyard. And he says to his wife, "Honey, tell me I've been a good man. In other words, tell me I've earned it." Well, that's just, that's the incarnation. Told beautifully. And what's the film? I think it's 1965, The Greatest Story Ever Told. There's a reason it's called that.
Right.
That ain't marketing.
Right.
Last question, Steve. You and I've talked off air a little bit about the distinction that some make between nationalism and patriotism. That nationalism, at least, this might be somewhat conditioned by media bias that wants to paint all nationalists as ethno-nationalists and alt-right, Charlottesburg, Virginia killers, and patriotism is something more Norman Rockwell and kind of apple pie. What's your take on that distinction?
Yeah, I think there would have been a time, particularly in the modern period, where such a distinction between nationalism and patriotism would be a good thing. Especially, 20th century was the age of ideology, as again Samuel Huntington put it. In the 20th century, the fundamental question is, what do you believe? Are you a capitalist or are you a communist? Where are you coming from here? So ideology was the sort of disembodied, almost Gnostic-like reigning paradigm of a machine-based, industrial-based society. We're not in that anymore. I mean, we still live under the structures and so forth, but the sentiments of people are much more postmodern, which means they move from ideology to identity. Or another way, we've moved from class-based consciousness more to culture consciousness. And in that sense, scholars are finding that patriotism and nationalism really kind of meld together. They converge. Nationalism under the guise of ideology can be very pernicious, and I think we saw that in the 30s and 40s when it's melded with because ideologies tended to be imperialistic. Ideologies don't have borders.
Mm-hmm.
So they tend to be very imperialistic and very purified. Ideology is pure, and if you don't believe right, something's wrong. Whereas I think what we have today really is, okay, globalism isn't working anymore. So where are we going to go? Well, let's go home. Really, in the end, it's honest. We were in the Iliad for ages and ages and ages, fighting the Cold War and the like. Well, what are we going to do? Well, part 2, Odyssey, let's go home. It's time to go home. And that wonderful Greek word nostalgia doesn't mean simply living in the past. Nostalgia means recovering a sense of continuity with the past. So a traditionalist is one who sees that ideas, institutions, and beliefs of the past, certain ideas, institutions, and beliefs, are indispensable to our human flourishing in the present and the future. So there's this lovely continuity between past, present, and future. As often as you eat of this bread and drink of this cup now, you proclaim the Lord's death in the past until he comes again in the future. Mm-hmm. Modernists were all about this massive disruption, including Nazis, the nationalists of the day, as massive disruption between our past and our future. They want to negate some past, and then Nazis actually wanted to go way, way, way back to some mythical Wagnerian past, what they call palingenesis, a kind of born-again kind of movement. And anything and everything that came in the way of it needed to be scrapped away and destroyed.
Yeah.
What you're seeing today with the new nationalism is they want to return. They want to embrace. When Benedict brought back the Catholic Mass, everyone thought that when the Tridentine Mass came back, that you were going to see a bunch of octogenarians and 70-year-olds kind of showing up with their walkers and saying through their artificial teeth, I remember when we did pre-Vatican II, we had Latin Mass. Patrick, who showed up? 16 to 26-year-olds. There's a South Carolina church that grew by 3 times. They had about 100 people at their parish on a regular basis. Now they have, since they brought the Latin Mass, 300 people. Yeah. And the median age of attendees was cut in half as a result. So it's probably around 28, 29.
100%.
So.
Hungry millennials.
Hungry millennials, hungry Zers, they all and we now have stats that show Generation Zers are more conservative and more religious than any other generation we've been tracking since the war generations. Absolutely fascinating. Yeah. So I just think in the end, what we have now is we have kind of a new nationalism. And while the term has certainly some ambiguity, moral ambiguity in terms of the way it's been used in the modern world, I think in the postmodern outworking, it's generally speaking a very good word in terms of basically wanting to just come home. And that's really what people, that's the only thing we want to do.
Being who you are.
Being who you
where
are.
You are.
Absolutely. And then we found in studies it's a net positive. People who tend to love their culture, customs, and traditions tend to love other cultures, customs, and traditions. It's a net. My wife's from Japan. I love Japan. My kids go gaga over every time they see an anime or a samurai series and so forth. But in the end, we can appreciate those cultures because we love our own. We believe in borders in the same way we lock our doors at night. It's not because we hate the people on the outside. It's because we love the people on the inside. As long as it's a love of one's own and not a hatred of the other, then you have something that's very, very good indeed.
And that's the difference between pluralism as an ism, as an idea virus, typified by a kind of, it's almost Prime Minister Trudeau's favorite mantra. And I'll start the sentence and you could finish it. Diversity is our greatest strength, right?
I'm not going to say it. You won't make me say it. I won't.
Say the sinner's prayer. Say the sinner's prayer. Yeah, why is diversity our greatest strength? No one ever says why that is, but it doesn't, forget it, it's a slogan. The more you're rooted in who you are and your basic lens and your worldview, the more you're willing to see how beautiful truth is outside your fold. That's astounding. That's great. How can people connect with you? You just put out so much good content. Did I hear you correctly? Twice a day?
Yeah, twice a day. We'll do 2 videos a day. Absolutely. Yeah. So we do, you can go to turleytalks.com, my last name, plus talks like TED Talks.
Yep.
Or you can go just to YouTube and just punch in Dr. Steve Turley. And we've got lots and lots of 2 videos a day, 5 days a week there.
Well, I'm going to keep my remaining 58 questions for another time, and thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Steve Turley. I hope just keep swinging for the fences. Big fan. I'm so glad we got a chance to connect.
Well, right back at you, Patrick. I love the work that you're doing, and I consider it really a privilege to have been asked to be on here. Really appreciate it.
All right. Feelings mutual. We'll do it again sometime. This is The Patrick Coffin Show. I want to check out, again, mypillow.com. Patrick, my first name, gets a big old discount for listeners of the show. And if you're interested in what we've been talking about today, you might want to check out Coffin Nation. Go to coffinnation.com, the largest culture building community on the earth now in 25 countries, including Japan. Be a saint. What else is there?
Hey, this is Patrick Coffin. If you like what you see and hear and you want to see and hear more, consider joining Coffin Nation as a full member. Just click right here and find out more about what that means. Nipsey, my fedora. That's Coffin Nation, the world's largest online community of culture builders. Click right here. See you on the inside.